Hey, Wafube, peace and blessings. This is Misael Bay, aka Warlock Asylum. And today I decided to talk about uh, an aspect of U.S. history and its relationship with Moorish Americans. Okay? My preference, I'm Nzulu shaman, but as you can tell from the Bay title, um, some of these brothers are part of my tribe. So there's a lot of history that's not known amongst the Moorish Americans about their own paradigm. For example, I was online, I was on Facebook, and I saw this sister. She, I guess, was a Moorish American, whatever. She was talking about the Democratic Party. And I decided to shake my head. I decided to shake my head. First of all, Malcolm X called the Democrats Dixiecrats, and he said that if you vote for Democrats, you're doing a disservice to your race. Now, I'm going to say out of the two parties, both of them have been compromised to a large degree, but I'm going to tell you just straight up, Democrats have never done anything for the cause or the movement of black people. All that stuff going on in the 1960s and all that kind of stuff like that, those were Republicans that were passing them bills. Those wasn't Democrats. Democrats was voting against them. If you don't know that, then you just need to study. So we're going to take it back all the way to the Dred Scott decision. And I got my notes here. So I'm going to point out a couple of things in my notes, and I'm later going to do an article about this. Okay. And I'm going to use ordinary terms and languages, you know what I'm saying, just to get the point across. But here it is. Dred Scott, a slave, asked the U.S. Circuit Court to award him his freedom because he and his master had resided in the state, Illinois, and the territory, Wisconsin, where slavery was banned. When the case reached the Supreme Court, the ruling was twofold. One, that any person descended from Africans, whether slave or free, was not a citizen of the United States and therefore had no standing to sue in federal court. And two, that the federal government had no power to regulate slavery in territory beyond the original 13 colonies. That's interesting. However, here's the thing. The rulings were illogical and racist. Basically, at the time the decision was made, the court was comprised of 7 Democrats, 1 Republican, 1 Whig. The final vote was 7-2, the Republican and the Whig dissenting. So basically, the Dred Scott decision was passed by Democrats. Democrats was 100% for it, and Republican and the Whig was not for it. So now you're up here trying to get stuff done through some Democrats, and you don't even know your history. That's one example. Let's go to some more examples. 1860, Civil War. Fearing the loss of their slaves after the election of Abraham Lincoln, the first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln was the first Republican president. A lot of people don't know that. The pro-slavery faction of the Democratic Party, comprising the majority and the concentrated in the slave states, decided to secede from the Union, precipitating the Civil War, resulting in 1,030,000 casualties, including 670,000 deaths. Now, it was the Democratic states that receded from the Union because of this nonsense. You understand? That's another case of the Democrats. Here we go. Now, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. On February 14, 1865, rabid Democrat and Confederate sympathizer John Wilkes Booth shot Republican President Abraham Lincoln in the back of his head while the president was watching a play at Ford's Theater. That's another Democrat. The Ku Klux Klan. Disgruntled Democrats, upset about the Confederacy's defeat in the Civil War and the granting of voting rights to freed slaves, formed an extremist group in Tennessee to further their political aims through violence and intimidation. The original group, led for a time by former Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest, petered out. Two later iterations of the group eventually spread throughout the South and even to northern states. The Tuskegee Institute estimates that 3,446 black Republicans, as the quote-unquote black Republicans, and 1,297 white Republicans were lynched by the Ku Klux Klan between 1882 and 1968. So here, these people, they're talking about the Democratic Party, that they may listen to the needs of minorities and stuff, and don't even realize that they form the KKK. So how can anybody expect to get anything done when they're aligned with the party? Like, okay, let me just break it down a little bit more. You trying to get into World Court or whatever, right? All this crazy stuff. And, you got all this paperwork or whatever, and we want our freedom, and we want this, and we want that, and then you're a Democrat. Not real. So how could you get anything when you're of the same party as the person who is oppressing you? You're the same political party as the person oppressing you. How could you get anything done? You're a laughing stock of all the nations, of all the political history. You're the laughing stock. You know why? Because you're in the same party that oppressed you. But I'm going to get into, how melanated people became Democrat and what the scheme is today. So let's continue on. The 13th Amendment. This is something that Moors talk about, the 13th Amendment. All right. Congressional Republicans unanimously backed the 13th Amendment banning slavery, while 63% of Democratic senators and 78% of Democratic House House members voted against it. So that wasn't passed by the Democrats. So what have the Democrats given you? Let's continue on. 1866, New Orleans raid on GOP. Democrats in the New Orleans government ordered police to raid an integrated meeting of Republicans, killing 40 and injuring 150. That's not talked about in history. What happened to that? That's not discussed. And this was an integrated meeting in Republicans. There was no integrated meeting in 1866 with Democrats, because Democrats was a pure, they were like extremely racist at that time. Okay. And they are today. They're just using certain mechanisms, to make things happen and to get you, just to tie you up mentally. You think something's going on and it ain't. And I'm going to get into that in a few minutes. But I just wanted to comment more because I'm going to post this eventually, but this is like real exciting. You know what I'm saying? When I discovered, this scheme or whatever, I was just like, man, this is crazy. So anyway, President Andrew Johnson. Democratic President Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Abraham Lincoln upon his assassination, vetoed an extension of the Freedmen's Bureau, which aided free slaves, and then vetoed the first Civil Rights Act, which was intended to grant citizenship to freed slaves, eventually accomplished by the 14th Amendment in spite of Johnson's opposition. Eager to send a message to radical Republicans, he also wanted to veto a bill to enfranchise blacks, quote unquote, in the District of Columbia, but the measure stalled in the Senate after passage by the House. The measure was finally passed over Johnson's veto in 1867. So this is another Democratic president that's preventing progress of creating a fully functional society. In order to have a fully functional society, everyone has to, be heard and, be given, the opportunity to seek prosperity. But these dudes, the Democrats, was just blocking that. Actually, a lot of people don't even know that the Republican Party, the reason why it was formed was to abolish slavery. And you talking about Democrats are helping you, and then you constantly talking about slavery. Like, I don't get it. This party was put in place to abolish slavery, and these dudes create the Ku Klux Klan, and today, the quote unquote African American by majority are Democrats. It's sad. It's very sad. But what's even sadder is that a lot of people who claim Moorish nationality and all this other stuff, they're not even aware of this. Let's continue on. 40 acres and a mule. During Major General William Sherman's march to the sea in 1865, he issued a special field order, number 15 actually, providing that land and sometimes army mules be given to free slaves. This is what he issued. He issued an order that free land and mules that they could work the land be given to slaves. This is where the idea of 40 acres and a mule came from. People don't even know where that came from. This came from a dude named Major General William, his middle initial is T, Sherman. And he came up with the idea on his march to the sea in 1865 that, he was like, yo, we should provide some of this land. Like, you go out to the west now and the land is still vacant. He was like, yo, we should, give some of this land to free slaves or whatever. So by June 1865, check this out, about 10,000 freed slaves settled on 400,000 acres in Georgia and South Carolina in June of 1865. But then what happened? Look what happened. When Democratic Andrew Johnson ascended to the presidency after Lincoln's assassination, he countermanded Sherman's orders and returned the land to its previous white owners. On February 5th, 1866, U.S. Representative Thaddeus Stephens, Republican from Pennsylvania, introduced legislation to implement 40 acres and a mule as the official policy, but the legislation was successfully opposed by the Democratic president, Andrew Johnson. And here these people on Facebook talking about Democrats and that like they're friends with Democrats. Like, how stupid can you be? How stupid can you be? You're using terms like the Dred Scott decision, which was voted against by Democrats. That's how it was put into place. You're talking about 40 acres and a mule, which was something that was created by Republicans. The term 40 acres and a mule was something that was created by Republicans. They came up with the idea, let's give these people land. Because the Republican Party was organized, which a lot of people don't know, to counteract against slavery. So now, land was given away. By June of 1865, 10,000 freed slaves settled on 400,000 acres of land in Georgia and South Carolina. And guess what? The Democratic president, Andrew Johnson, vetoed it. Vetoed it. You see what I'm saying? So, I don't know what to tell you dudes, because nowadays, 90% of quote-unquote African Americans and all other minorities for the Democratic Party. And we're going to discuss that in 1 second. Let's look a little bit further. The 14th Amendment. 94% of Republican senators and 96% of Republican House members voted for the 14th Amendment, guaranteeing all Americans equal protection under the law. Every congressional Democrat voted against it. Every congressional Democrat voted against it. But guess what? 97% of African Americans today are Democrats. How stupid can you be? Let's continue further. Presidential impeachment. Angered by Democrat President Andrew Johnson's thwarting of congressional wishes regarding Reconstruction, the House impeached him on February 24th, the first of only two U.S. presidents ever impeached, and both of them were Democrats. A lot of people don't know that. The only presidents who have been impeached were Democrats. On May 16th, after furious backroom dealing and promises from Johnson to various senators, the Senate fell one vote short of the two-thirds majority required for the conviction. Democrats once again. Georgia expels blacks from state legislation, quote-unquote blacks from state legislation. On September 3rd, 25 black, quote-unquote black legislatures in Georgia, this happened in the year 1868. All Republicans were expelled by the Democrat majority on the grounds that the new state constitution did not guarantee, quote-unquote, blacks the right to hold office. So when people talk about Congress and how, Reconstruction, there was a lot of, like, quote-unquote, black people in Congress, melanated people in Congress, and they got disposed from their office. Guess who was doing it? It was the Democrats. So how you going to, try to fight for something, go to world court, and you're a Democrat, and then the people who are doing the stuff to you were Democrats? How stupid can you be? Let's continue. On September 28th, when free blacks rallied to stop an attack on a white Republican newspaper editor, white Democrats massacred 300 of them. People forgot about that. This happened in 1868. It happened in a place called Opelousas, Louisiana. On September 28th, 300 people were killed by Democrats because they rallied to stop an attack on a white Republican newspaper. And the Democrats came and killed 300 of them. That's it. And you're a Democrat. How stupid can you be? Let's continue. Democrats, Horatio Seymour and Francis Blair ran for president and vice presidents respectively using the motto, "This is a white man's country, let white men rule." This was the 1868 Democratic campaign. Today, 95 to 97% of African Americans and minorities are Democrats. How stupid can you be? Let's continue on. Let's go to the 15th Amendment, and we're going to go to the year 1870. When Southern Democrats balked at implementing the 14th Amendment, Republicans in Congress passed the 15th Amendment guaranteeing blacks the right to vote. Every single Democrat voted against it. And the Republicans was unanimous. It was nearly a unanimous vote. But every single Democrat voted against it. Today you're a Democrat and you're sitting here watching some movie, about Martin Luther King fighting for the right to vote, and you're a Democrat. Martin Luther King wasn't a Democrat. He wasn't a Democrat or a Republican by choice. If you really look into it, he just worked with what favor was going on at the time. A lot of times to persuade, quote-unquote African Americans, or some people say unconscious Moors, whatever, title or fixation you want to use is all right by me. But some people are sensitive to it. But anyway, we know who we're talking about. So, the thing about it is, a lot of times they put out these fans. You might have seen one in your grandmother's house that had Kennedy, JFK, RFK, and MLK. And K is the 11th letter of the alphabet. You should look that up, what the number 11 means. But make a long story short, they put that out there to kind of persuade people to think that King was a Democrat and that Democrats were doing stuff to later generations. But that MLK, RFK, whatever K, that's 3 Ks. You know what I'm saying? But, it is what it is, but he wasn't a Democrat. Okay, 1864, Democrats seized Texas state government. On January 17th, armed Democrats seized the Texas state government to prevent integration by the Republicans. The Democrats were staunch on separation, very staunch on it. There's a lot of more incidents. I just want to move through some other stuff here that you may find. Here's another one. I'm going to say this, give this to you. Nearly 200 times, check this out, nearly 200 times in 86 years, Republicans in the House passed anti-lynching legislation, each time killed by Democrats in the Senate. Consequently, the United States Congress, to its shame, never passed anti-lynching legislation. In 2005, a Republican-controlled Senate officially apologized for the failure. These dudes, the Republicans, tried to pass anti-lynching legislation, and it was all vetoed by Democrats. Every single time. 200 times. 200 times. These dudes, the Republicans, tried to pass legislation to make, you can't lynch somebody. And the Democrats vetoed it 200 times in 96 years. And 97% of African Americans today are Democrat and minorities. How stupid can you be? Let's continue. Let's continue to some other stuff here. It's not even known. The Wilmington insurrection of 1898, when a Republican mayor and a biracial city council were elected in Wilmington, North Carolina, Democrat white supremacists attacked and destroyed the Daily Record, the state's only black-owned newspaper, and then rampaged through the city, killing and rioting. An estimated 100 quote-unquote blacks were killed. More than 2,000 quote-unquote blacks subsequently moved out the city permanently, turning Wilmington from a black majority to a white majority. The mayor and the city council were forced to resign at gunpoint and then were replaced by Democrats, the only recorded coup d'etat in U.S. history. That's something. You want to study history, study that. But look who's behind it. It's the Democrats. So here again, we see that the Democrats are thwarting efforts for progress of melanated people in America. President Woodrow Wilson. Here's something about President Woodrow Wilson. This dude, he was phenomenal because a lot of people know, I'm like into the martial arts or whatever, and a lot dealing with Japanese history, the Shinto, their spirituality, their shamanism, and also, the shamanism here or whatever. And, just on the universal level. But I have written a lot about that. Here's an interesting thing about Woodrow Wilson. A lot of people don't know that before World War II, what really split Japan and the United States apart was Japan came to a place where it was meeting with the League of Nations, and it came with some documentation that was going to abolish, melanated people in America being treated as second-class citizens. Right? Japan came with this. Actually, Japan was the first country, the first country to actually put Martin Luther King's holiday on the map was Japan. Right? That's a whole other story. I'm going to do a video about that one day. But anyway, Woodrow Wilson, they had a plan to stop second-class citizenship in America, and Woodrow Wilson denounced it. He was like, nah, I can't do that because the Southern dudes, they ain't going to reelect me. That was that. And from that time on, Japan, United States went two different directions. And so the rest is history. But concerning another thing about Woodrow Wilson, is shortly after his inauguration, Democratic President Woodrow Wilson fired most of the African Americans who held posts within the federal government. He resegregated the mail service, resegregated the Treasury Department, and then segregated the Navy, which had always been integrated. A lot of people don't know that the Navy had always been integrated, okay? But Woodrow Wilson segregated it. He resegregated the mail service. He resegregated the Treasury Department. Can you imagine that? And this was as far as possible from being a movement against the Negroes, said Wilson. I sincerely believe it to be in their best interest. And he was a Democrat. And today, 97% of quote unquote African Americans, that's what they call themselves. You have to respect that. If you are more, you know what I'm saying, you got to respect other people, B. You can't teach someone and then you're going to tell them what they should call themselves. You respect what people call themselves. If you're a Moorish American, that's what you are. He's an African American. He has a right to call himself that. Okay, so, yeah, man, they this was a Democratic. So 97% of African Americans and a lot of Moorish Americans and minorities are Democratic today, even though the Democrats have done nothing for the interests of these people. How stupid can you be? Birth of a Nation, 1915. Democratic President Woodrow Wilson invited his cabinet and the entire Supreme Court to the Executive Mansion's first film presentation, a screening of D.W. Griffith's racist masterpiece, A Birth of a Nation, which depicts the Ku Klux Klan's heroic post-Civil War struggle against the menace of emancipated quote-unquote blacks, portrayed by white actors in blackface. That was a Democratic thing. A lot of people don't know that. Birth of a Nation, the film, was created by a Democrat, and Woodrow Wilson, a Democratic president, invited his whole cabinet for a private viewing of the film. And today, 97% of African Americans, some Moorish Americans, and minorities, they're all Democrats. How stupid can you be? Let's keep it moving. 1922, dive in the anti-lynching bill. Filibuster Senate Democrats killed a Republican bill passed by the House that made lynching a federal crime. They killed it again in 1923 and 1924. So once again, the Democrats stopped this. I've seen, like, there's been recently, even with the Trump administration. I'm not saying, like, I know who this dude is or whatever, but actually his administration did pass something to help people in prison out. And the Democrats immediately came and they squashed it. I'm going to try to look that up as we're going through the post. But I'm not going to be too long because I want to talk about, what's going on today and why a lot of people, melanated people, are Democrats. Let's go into something else. Someone who appears as your friend. Democratic President Franklin Roosevelt appointed two well-known Southern segregationists to the Supreme Court, James Byrnes from South Carolina and former Ku Klux Klan Hugo Black from Alabama, who filibustered an anti-lynching bill as a senator and was an outspoken anti-Catholic. Not satisfied with merely nominating replacements for retirees, in 1937, Roosevelt proposed legislation that would add 6 justices to the court, a court-packing scheme that would create a majority of Democrats favorable for his political agenda. The power grab fortunately failed at the time, but was resurrected successfully by Barack Obama in 2013. Because y'all don't see what's going on. Because these people speak nice to y'all. Meanwhile, these dudes is putting all their Klan affiliates in the politics, okay? And you're online talking about some Republicans and the Democrats have done nothing for you. Nothing. They have done nothing for you. Roosevelt and Truman administrations. During the combined 20 years of the Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Harry Truman administrations, Democrats stopped all civil rights actions. That was from the year 1933 to 1953. It's called 20 Years in the Desert. 20 years in the desert, from 1933 to 1953, Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Harry S. Truman, their administrations had nothing to do with civil rights legislation. And you see this dude um, out here praying to FDR at his gravesite and stuff. It's stupid. How stupid can you be? So I'm gonna kind of close it down a little bit because as we move on into the '60s, you kind of get an idea of a lot of things that was going on. Maybe I'll bring something into play. I'll pick it up from here, which is something that happened. We'll see what time it is. In 1964. In 1964, Democratic President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the bill after former Ku Klux Klan exalted Cyclops Robert Byrd's 14-hour filibuster and the votes of 22 other Senate Democrats, including Tennessee's Al Gore Sr., failed to scuttle the measure. So Al Gore, actually his father voted against the Civil Rights Act. But in total, 82% of congressional Republicans voted for the bill versus 60% of Democrats. After signing the bill and using Deaf News Media spin to steal credit for what was essentially a Republican accomplishment, because the Republicans actually voted, they were in favor of it. The Democrats really weren't. But because there was enough, Republicans, the 1964 Civil Rights Act was passed. Although the administration was Democratic, these dudes wasn't voting for it. Okay. Johnson was quoted as saying, that'll keep niggas voting Democrat for the next 200 years. And he pretty much, was correct on that sort of thing. He was pretty much correct on that because that's what's happening. And what's going on today is that they kind of thoroughly wiped out any claims of those people, melanated people who reside here, to ever get 40 acres and a mule. How so? During the 1970s, the Democratic Party enacted a very ingenious scheme. What they did is they marketed themselves as the party for the minorities. And a lot of people went for it because the Democrats, they speak nicely to minorities. But if you look at the history, they've done nothing. And since the majority of quote-unquote African Americans and minorities have voted for Democrats, any progress that was made has been halted. In other words, what I'm saying is that if you look at the time when African Americans and minorities became Democrats, there have been no progress at all. At all. So what's going on today? So they market themselves as the party for minorities. And what they did is they did that to quench the quote-unquote African Americans, plea for justice. In other words, you put everybody in the same pot. Now, quote-unquote African Americans here, melanated people here, they got issues with their government that go back a long time, maybe 400 years. Now you got this dude coming in from South America. He may be oppressed wherever he came from, but his relationship with the United States government is only like 10 to 20 years old. But you put them in the same pot so that the dude that's just coming over the border cancels out some of the issues that these people have. So instead of focusing on, hey, let's make this thing right with these group of people, that were enslaved here in the country, and some of the things that happened that the Democrats primarily did, what they do is they focus on other groups, you know what I'm saying, and put their equation into the mix. And these groups have really, I mean, it's unfortunate because they're oppressed. But in terms of relationship with the United States government, they ain't got no history like that. They ain't got no history like that. And what they'll do to make things even worse is they'll put these people in government before quote unquote African Americans. So when you look at like President Barack Obama, he's actually a real African American president by the true definition of the term. He's not a black president. He's an African American president. And on his birth certificate, the reason why he never wanted to show it, because it says white. So that's why he didn't want to show it. You know what I'm saying? You know, that's Trump. There's your answer. He didn't want to show it because it says white. And that might have had, you know, a lot of different effects. You understand what I'm saying? That might have had a lot of different effects because depending on what society you live in, you trace your lineage primarily by the mother if he's a traveling man. So I don't know, you know, but I do know that the birth certificate, it says white. That's why he didn't want to show the birth certificate. You see what I'm saying? And it's sad because his grandparents or great grandparents or great 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 grandparents, they never picked cotton in Mississippi. Same thing with this woman Kamala Harris. She's running for president. She's not running for president now. She's getting a name for herself because when Trump spoke about Obama, like about his birth certificate before he was even running for president, Trump, I'm speaking of, before he was considering running for president, you know, everybody knows the situation between him and Obama. So he was talking about Obama and his birth certificate and stuff. And that same week, 3 days later, he gives Kamala Harris like $10,000 for whatever she was trying to do, you know, in politics at the time. So they're friends, you know what I'm saying? She's received money from Donald Trump. She's not going to run against the dude. But the reason why she's appearing to run against the dude is so that she can gain a reputation because no one knows her. So by the time 2024 comes, she can really run. You see what I'm saying? And so this is the scheme that's going on. It's unfortunate because in a way, like it looks to create something where, you know, people who are melanated from different countries can work together to gain, but actually it works against because they're just picking their favorites out of that scheme. The other thing that I want to discuss, you know, on the Moorish side of stuff or whatever, it's like, yo, you guys got to get together, B, because the stuff you talking about is far, far away from reality in a lot of different terms. You know what I'm saying? And that's not, you know, attack on anybody or whatever. It's just, here's the issues that you concern. You coming around with paperwork. Paperwork is fine. You don't really need paperwork if you know who you are, what you're doing. You don't need any paperwork. If you want to become, well, you can't, if you want to declare yourself as a Moor, you just change your name. You know what I'm saying? You just take on a title and attribute, and that's it. You go and you do that legally, as they say, legally or whatever. And that's it. You don't have to be affiliated with none of these groups, and you live the best life that you wish to live. It happens a lot in Jewish communities. A lot of those people, Jewish communities, they ain't messing with the synagogue like that. They consider that stuff heretical. Now, if they have some sort of issues and stuff, and they may be attacked, they may come together to preserve their freedom. However, a lot of Jews are atheists. You know what I'm saying? Whatever. It's like a ethno-religious identity. So they're not, you know, all into it like that. And so if you see something ain't right with something, it doesn't mean that you can't declare yourself who you are. And that's what, you know, Drew Ali meant when he says that you know that you are what your ancestors are, namely Moorish, because a lot of people skip over what's the meaning of that. And they just assume like, hey, my ancestor was this. He wasn't saying that for that reason. He was saying that because machines break down. Every machine breaks down. No organization that was operating during the time of Rome exists today in the same vehicle it does. Either it advances itself or regresses and it destroys itself. But if you want to talk about membership, ain't nobody got a membership roll from 1CE. You can say certain concepts exist, yes, but no one's got a membership roll, from Julius Caesar time. They don't have a membership roll. You know what I mean? They don't have a record book from Julius Caesar time. You know what I'm saying? Other than genealogy, you know what I mean? So you have to think like corporations, they plan things every 10 years. They plan their maneuvers, what they're going to do between 1990 and 2000, what they're going to do between 2020 and 2023. Governments, people talk about, hey, I'm down with this empire and government. Governments plan their movements every 100 years. If you're a part of something and they can't show you the movement for 100 years, or maybe that's information that, like you're not going to get just joining, but they don't have no, like, outline for the next 100 years, you know what I'm saying? Don't get with it. You know what I'm saying? If you see people and they're in an organization and they're not acting virtuous, they're doing all types of side stuff because, they want to be street, but then don't want to be whatever. That's what impresses them the most, is that way of life. But they figure they come into an operation where there's a lot of people who are studious and try to bring the same sort of elements in that. Don't bother with them. You know what I'm saying? Don't bother with them. And this is how this goes down. But the biggest thing why I'm saying this is that it's not the same United States government it was in Joel Lee's time. That's the thing. So how are you going to recompense that? I don't know. You know what I'm saying? With the program that you have presently, you need to kind of understand what's going on. Time-honored principles of honesty, truth, justice, those things are everlasting, for the most part, as far as the history of man is concerned. So you don't need to change any of those things. And I'm not one to be like, oh, you should update this. Like, I get it. However, you just have to recognize that's not the same government anymore. Around the time that the the minority groups here, I hate to even use the term minorities, but I'm just using it in terms of general identification because there's a lot of people watching this video who might not be aware, what these terms mean or whatever. However, anyway, during the time that, like, the quote-unquote African Americans really majority became Democrats was probably like around 20 years after the Nazis came into the country. And that's a big thing. It's called Operation Paperclip. And what happened was, during the end of the war, World War II, George Bush's grandfather, Prescott Bush, he was like talking to Harry Truman. So we already talked about Truman's history in this video. Let me just pull the screen up here for a second. Let me just pull this up. We already talked about Truman's history in the video or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So Prescott Bush, the grandfather of George Bush Jr., he comes and he's like, look, man, we got all these scientists over here. We don't want them to go to another country because they got some serious technology, man. And we don't want that to go to another country and they gain power and then, we lose a war. So Truman was like, look, if we can bring over the scientists, but you gotta wait till the war is over first. Prescott Bush goes behind Truman's back and starts bringing the scientists over before the war is over. And these scientists, like, they had no debriefing. So Nazism, it's not like some stuff you see on TV where dudes are just shaving their heads and throwing up swastikas and stuff. These dudes had the faith that a Christian had going into a lion's den. Some of these dudes were able to trace their ancestry back to the 17th century, showing their white purity in 1945, long before, 60 years before Ancestry.com came on the scene. This is how dedicated they was to their deal. When they start bringing the Nazi scientists over, this is very important. When they start bringing the Nazi scientists over, the United States, I think they retrieved 21,000 tons of scientific documents. That's where the birth of modern science comes from. So if you see a black nationalist on YouTube telling, quote unquote African American youth that, forget about religion and to believe in science, they got that stuff from an agent. Because modern science is the invention of Nazism. And people confuse science, modern science, the term, with technology. Technology is another beast. That's something different. We're talking about modern science, because modern science in a lot of ways is hypothetical. It's not actually based on facts. You see what I'm saying? And so there's a lot of things that are going on. I mean, a lot of stuff that's going on behind your back that you're not even aware of, and you're still talking about something like happened 60, 70 years ago. You're bringing in these concepts that ain't even happening because these dudes done took over the government. What they did is they played it. They created a space race. I'm going to go into this a little bit because it comes up recently in the Trump administration. Then you could see when presidents start talking about NASA, they talking about feeding the Nazi party money because that's what they used it for. They gave them jobs at NASA. They was able to milk money from the government. And if you look at the timeline, what happened was, because a lot of things was going on at that time. So you had the Roswell crash, you had the UFO thing. And the UFO thing, it was settled by Gerald Ford. You remember that dude that became president later? His role, you could look this up online, his role 15 years before presidency was to research UFO phenomena. And you know what conclusion he came up with? He said there's something that exists out there. Definitely. All the facts point to something that exists. And it's like, yo, we got to get this dude out of UFO research. He's too honest. Let's make him president. And that's how he became president. That's Gerald Ford. His role in Washington, D.C. was a UFO researcher. You wouldn't know that. But by then, the Nazis was in the country. So we don't know if they made it up because NASA, they can use it as a way to milk the government for money. Then what they did is they created a space race with Russia. Some of the other Nazi scientists went over to Russia. So now they're milking both governments. And through that, they became huge. If you look at the timeline, when the Nazis came into the country at NASA, we have not had a military president since Eisenhower. And you sitting here talking about a document from 1935. It doesn't make sense. You're living in a different government. They put drugs in the country. They thwarted the civil rights movement, and they thwarted it bad. I mean, it's bad now because all it is about entertainers. You have the media doesn't put a mic in front of any religious leader or politician in the quote unquote African or Latino community at all. All it does is just talk about political reactions from sports and entertainers. And these people in world history, like you fizzing over this little decades and stuff, but you got to look at the millennia of world history. How people going to look at this point in time 1,000 years from now? That's what you have to think about. And all them people that you follow, them actors and rappers and all that kind of stuff, they're going to be perceived as how people perceive entertainers thousands of years ago, as a court jester. That's all they are, a court jesters. So now the whole media is throwing a mic asking someone's opinion from a court jester. I mean, they may make a little influence or whatever, but when something goes down, like a 9/11 or something, everybody's in the house, B. You know what I'm saying? Their role is not to take care of people and their welfare. They can say something that represent what the people are feeling, and the government already knows that. You know what I'm saying? But it ain't nothing that's going to change anything, really. You know what I'm saying? If you get to that level of entertainment, you might just get John Lennon or Bob Marley'd out. You know what I'm saying? So, recognize what you living in. You know what I'm saying? Then the main thing about all this stuff is that people are afraid to move past the 1960s. You know why they're afraid to move past the 1960s? Because in order for them to do so, they have to deal with the drug dealer, and they're afraid to do that. So they just stay in the 1960s, and that's that. You know what I'm saying? Now, if you're gonna talk about what is it, you know, uplifting fallen humanity and all that crazy stuff, then you have to be fearless and regard at those things and have no sympathy towards any negativity happening to your community to exterminate it out because you represent that force that could change things. You understand what I'm saying? All this stuff about debating is all that stuff is just it's just ways to confuse your mind, and it's just a waste of time. No one's going to get on television and say that they made a mistake. That's just stupid. You see what I'm saying? It's not stupid. It's some real man stuff, but it's just stupid to think that. So all them discussions that be going on online, you dudes debating, Moors debating the Hebrew Israelites and stuff like that. That shit makes no sense. It's just a waste of time. It's just a waste of time. That's why I don't even engage in that stuff. I don't even be around dudes like that because they stupid. You know what I'm saying? You go around a dude, hey, why aren't your fez on? Do you own a house? Stupid stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? You know, like it's just dumb. You know, somebody want to squat somebody's house out and, you know, we got paperwork and nationality. You don't even know what the stuff means, B. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was doing that stuff in teenage years. And instead of building, you know, I was watching some interview with these dudes, Moors actually, talking in Harlem. They were talking about opening, like you still talking about opening your own business? Like you still on that? You know what I'm saying? That's not even hard, B. You can do that in like on 15 minutes online now. You know what I'm saying? Opening your own business. Slaves own their own businesses. You know what I'm saying? That's not moving anything around. The only way you can move a community is to have love amongst yourselves. That's the only way you can move the community. But instead of doing that, we just still spitting on the ground, stupid stuff like that. You see a man now, you have to feel like you have to cough up a body fluid. They call that homosexuality where I'm from. You call it spitting on the ground. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? You know, but there definitely needs to be some changes, and I'm gonna try to work, make those changes through shamanism. I'm not gonna do it through the templates that you guys are using because they don't work. Some have been around for like 50 years, tens of decades. This stuff don't work. It don't work, B. I'm not doing that. I'm not getting on there doing something stupid. Like, I respect the sciences and stuff. A lot of it is true. But the way you guys are enacting it and implementing the stuff, it ain't what it's supposed to be. You know what I'm saying? Even like these dudes follow CM Bay, right? You look at the clock of destiny. You look at the clocks of destiny. CM Bay said, don't talk about this stuff openly. He says that in the clocks. And you on YouTube talking about it. Stupid. Stupid stuff. This dude on YouTube talking all this stuff. Meanwhile, in the clocks it says, don't talk about this stuff publicly because you will be denied. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not stuff that people are supposed to know from their end. So you just, like, you know, there's ways you can get it to your people, but you just don't talk about stuff like that openly. Why would you? You see what I'm saying? Like, you just, like, I don't know, you just self-hypnotize thinking that you have all these rights and stuff. It ain't even real like that. You know what I'm saying? Then on top of it, here's the thing. Last video I did, you know, it was good. I got like a lot of love or whatever, you know what I'm saying? You know, it took me a long time to come to YouTube because to me, YouTube was like one step away of the dark web, you know what I'm saying? I'll get into that another day. But I didn't really want to mess with that stuff, you know what I'm saying? So, make a long story short, I do a video, dudes hit me up or whatever. Hey man, you know, I'm having some Moorish classes on law and stuff like that. And then I had to pause for a second because it's like, you don't teach people virtue. Like none of these classes in the beginning talk about character building. So how do you know who you dealing with? You see what I'm saying? Put someone through some character building classes, like virtue, like the power of the subconscious mind, stuff like that to let them know what they dealing with. Not just come in and just show someone how to do something, manipulate a law or something, some dumb stuff, literally dumb stuff, to try to get them to do. I don't get it. You know what I'm saying? I don't get it. You know what I'm saying? It's stupid. But for those people out there who really want to, progress and stuff like that, you know what I'm saying, I'm willing to build with and stuff. But all them people talking that foolish stuff and stuff that don't make no sense and picking up dictionaries for no reason, and y'all just dumb, B, because that stuff ain't gonna help you at all. You know what I'm saying? The only thing that's gonna help you is the compass. And the compass, you don't even know north, south, east, and west. Look up the organ, the heart, and compare it to the compass, and then you understand what navigation means. Navigation, if you can't, like alchemate your emotional state, how you can't do anything else, because that's what draws your experience to you. See what I'm saying? All that other stuff is just a waste of time. Learning this and learning that, it's just a waste of time. You could be learning about astrology, nature, all sorts of sciences and stuff, and you want to learn how to memorize what someone said 100 years ago, and you know, pretend that you in court in 1862. You stupid. But to make a long story short, you know what I'm saying, there's a lot of people out there, in the Moorish front who are trying to do their thing. There's a lot of people trying to do their thing in the world to help make it a better place. So I want to give a big shout out to all those people, and to keep doing what you're doing. And I just want to share a little light, because what some sister said, who was a Bay or something, about the Democratic Party, and it's just like, man, nah, you don't even know what it is, yo. Democratic Party is not for you. And if you have any questions about it, you can go into YouTube, which you're already on, and look up what Malcolm X said about Democrats. So I'm going to say peace and blessings. This is Warlock Asylum, and have a good night.